Hello and welcome to the Let's Talk Azure podcast with your hosts Sam Foote.
And Alan Armstrong.
If you're new here, we're a pair of Azure and Microsoft 365 focused IT security professionals. It's episode 13 of season 4. Alan and I recently had a discussion around Azure Lighthouse. It's a service within Azure which provides delegated access across tenants for both customers and partners. Here are a few things that we covered: how multi-tenant management is used, how are organizations using Lighthouse internally, and how are partners using Lighthouse with their customers. It's a really great episode, so without further delay, let's jump in. Hey Alan, how are you doing today?
Hey Sam, not doing too bad. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thank you. Very good. I just can't believe we're on episode 13 of this season already. It surprised me when I started writing out my notes.
Yeah, we're definitely technically almost almost 3/3 or 2/3, at least 2/3 through the proposed season. So
yeah, exactly.
I feel like we might have to extend our numbers.
Yeah, and it's a bit crazy at the moment. People are starting to whisper about Christmas. It's the year is motoring along, right?
It's only September.
I know. Wow. Yeah. So lots of exciting things coming up this week. Registration for Ignite opened, so hoping to see lots of great updates coming out of there.
Yeah, for sure. Can't wait to see. I can't think what I was going to say now. Yeah, to get in. Get in on that.
Yeah, I mean, we often, especially for us, we often see loads of great product updates and announcements there, right? At Ignite, that's really our main focus one, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, from our side, and the new Microsoft Secure one that happened last year, wasn't it? At March
Yeah, that's
time.
true. Yeah,
that was a new first, wasn't it? So, yeah, Ignite's a good one to see all the new stuff coming in and what Microsoft's sort of steer is for their FY in effect.
Yeah, I'm my assumption is it's going to be AI, GPT, slap. What do you think?
Yeah, I think seeing the first banners, I think it is all around potentially AI and this bringing in some of the new stuff, or maybe a lot of stuff they've brought in is now going GA as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, lots of investment in that space.
For sure.
Should we get started on Lighthouse?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so probably to start off with then, Sam, why is multi-tenant management important?
Yeah, so it's probably worth starting from the basic requirement really, is that in certain scenarios, I use the couple of scenarios that we're actually going to talk through today. Service providers or partners, requiring access to their customers' environments. And if you imagine, for those customers, they could in theory, those partners, they could in theory have hundreds of customers that they need regular or semi-regular access to their environment. They may be managing infrastructure resources. They might be looking at logs, backups, X, Y, and Z for their customers. Lots of different use cases there, and really there needs to be I'll call it grown up and integrated way to get access into those environments. The other scenario really is around I don't really want to call them enterprise organizations, because I think even in smaller organizations, we'll talk about some sort of organization-based use cases. There are times when you want to be able to access multiple directories or tenants without having to sort of context switch between them. So really what we are wanting to do is we are wanting to peer in, we're wanting to access, maybe deploy to these other environments, and really in the past that has been a challenge. You might have separate accounts. Let's say you have a production, a development and staging tenant. Maybe completely isolate your different environments internally. Previously, you might have had to have like 3 logins that you would switch between to deploy resources in. You know, um, what other scenarios have you seen, Alan, about actually getting access to other environments? Is there any other sort of strategies that you've seen
Yeah, I
previously?
mean, you have got the B2B side of things, so you can invite your at least in the Azure environments, you can invite your accounts into the other tenants, so become guests, and then you can switch your context. Like you said, you can have separate accounts with separate passwords that you've then got to manage. And then, yeah, kind of the one that we're going to talk about today, I think is the kind of main ones of ways to be able to access those other tenants. Um, so yeah.
Okay. So yeah, do you want me to just jump in and sort of talk about Lighthouse, I suppose, as the next step, and how that aims to simplify that process really. What Lighthouse is designed to do is it's there to provide a management plane and sort of a process for managing and brokering that access into different environments. So if you imagine you've got a main tenant or a service provider tenant, what Lighthouse can do is it can orchestrate the delegation of resources from an external or customer tenant. So what you effectively do is you define a list of authorized users or groups or service principals can directly work in the context of those customer subscriptions without actually having an account on that side. And what you can do is you can define the scope of this delegation. So you can either do it at the subscription level or you can do it at the resource group level, depending on how you want to access that. And it's probably worth talking about the control that Lighthouse sort of provides those customer tenants. There is a completely segregated area called service providers in the Azure portal, which allows those customers to first onboard service providers. I'll talk about that in a little bit more depth when we talk about the customer scenario, the service provider and customer scenario. But that service provider portal is really showing you the offers that you've subscribed to and also the delegations that you've also assigned via those offers. So it allows you to, in a really simple place, in a completely self-contained area of Azure, it shows you who and what you've given access to in your environment. And it's worth talking about the roles and sort of how that side of things works. So when you define your offer, inside of that offer, you populate it with the roles and the users or groups or service principals that have been assigned those roles. There are some limitations in terms of roles. I believe they can't have the owner role. Is that right, Alan?
Yep.
And there's some things about data actions. Any roles with data actions aren't permitted, and there's a bunch of other specific actions that are not supported, like mostly all of the ones out of underneath Microsoft authentication. So there is some what's the best way of explaining it? There's some thinking that you need to do about the specific roles that you're actually assigning. And there is some guidance from Microsoft about how to look through those roles and understand if any of those roles are actually going to have any issues when you do that.
Yeah, I was going to say with the role side of things, I think that's more of sort of safeguarding, isn't it, from a access? Because if a parent, we'll say a parent or a third party tenant has owner to a subscription, they can, in effect, I suppose, steal it in some form, because they could change the owner to it and change the tenant it's attached to,
Well,
potentially.
owner, or I believe it's user access administrator, is what's actually used to onboard the offer, right?
Mm.
So in theory, you could onboard any offer that you wanted to, right? So you'd get this
Yeah.
like, you get this like infinite loop of access, right? You could first be onboarded, and then you could onboard somebody. I assume you could onboard somebody else as well, because you would have the permissions to do that. It's worth calling out that the customer has the ability to revoke access from their side as well when these delegations are made. So it still allows a scenario where there's a simplified user experience and sort of open and well documented from the customer side on how to revoke access should they want to at a later date.
And if I remember, the roles are in effect Azure roles, so it's nothing to do with Microsoft Enter ID roles, things like that. It is literally, access to the Azure infrastructure or the Azure resources, isn't it?
Yes, and the only real sort of identity based roles is that you can use it to assign managed identities, I believe, through it as well. So there is a provision for managed identities, I believe, but there's nothing from the way that I see it. It's all around, like you say, those management of Azure resources more than it is, Enter ID roles.
Okay, and can you, what sort of scoping can you do? Because you kind of said about delegating the resources. Is it to the whole subscription? Can you go down any lower?
Whole subscription, and you can also do it down to the resource group level as well. So, and I believe when you do the assignment of that offer, that is when the customer in the customer tenant makes that decision about where it's placed, basically at that point. So it's giving them the control of being able to scope you into specific areas, right?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I got some other questions, but I think I'll leave it for now. I think I'll tie in some of the other bits.
Okay. Yeah. And
Okay. So.
yeah,
Go on.
sorry. There's just one more bit on that as well. It's probably worth calling out. Is you can apparently, and I haven't done this before, but apparently, if you transfer delegated subscriptions between Azure AD tenants, that Lighthouse delegation is kept on that transfer. According to Microsoft, it is only if there is further delegation, I believe, if you're delegating a resource group into a subscription that is delegated, I believe, it can be removed at that point. But I haven't even considered that, and I only read that in some documentation and some tutorials that I was looking through.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't know. Yeah, that's interesting. 'Cause I suppose it's not attached. It's kind of attached to the tenant. It's interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I suppose the parent tenant isn't changing, right?
No, that is true. But I guess it's just the visibility, because in effect, when you create that connection, then unless it must just auto update from the parent side of it to say, hey, it's actually now in this tenant,
Yeah,
rather than it
exactly.
being like that one time initial connection sort of thing.
Yeah, I'd love to give that a try, to be totally honest with you, and see how that workflow actually, works. Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So how we kind of talked about, partners, organizations, individually, but how do partners use Lighthouse? What's some of the scenarios?
Okay, so the main, I would say the main sort of entry point for an offer being rolled out to a customer tenant is through the marketplace. And what service partners can do is they can make a marketplace offering. And what what you can do is when you go to the service providers Azure portal area, you can add add an offer via the marketplace, and basically you get a pop up in front of you which shows you like a big long list of like an infinite list of all of the providers marketplace offerings. So you can search for your service provider there, and then effectively that template will take you through getting their service, their offering, onboarded into your environment. But effectively, what that is just a pre-made set of roles and assignments off to the onto the service provider side. Is there anything else that happens in terms of that, Alan? I believe it's just that identity to role mapping.
Yeah.
Basically.
So the parent or the partner specifies the roles that the lighthouse is going to have, where you decide to assign it, and they can't they can't change it. It's on deployment when it gets added. If they want, if roles need to be updated or roles need to be removed for that offering, like individual roles, not necessarily offboarding, then a new offer needs to be accepted to in fact run the ARM template again and deploy the new roles for that offering. The only thing I was going to say as well was in the marketplace, a partner can also invite you to their like private like marketplace and just send you the offer, so it doesn't have to be public as well. So looking at it from the other side, if like you've got a service that you don't want anybody to just click on and start onboarding, you can individually assign it to a tenant from the partner side, and then that customer can see it in their list as well.
Okay, yeah, that's really good. Extra bit of functionality that you've got there for partners, and once those delegations have been made, that's when you're going to start to see from the partner side, you're going to start to see the resources flow through into your partner. I say into your partner tenant, but effectively it's just your partner portal, right? You're seeing a representation of those resources like they were your side, basically, right? Especially if you've got a permanent role assignment. We'll talk about non-permanent role assignments in a bit, but if you've got that permanent role assignment, let's say you've got contributor, to a resource group, you're going to see that resource group and basically exactly the same as you would see any other resource group your side. You're going to see that subscription in your filters list. You're going to be able to drill down to that level, and if you didn't know, and I suppose from the naming, at that point, you wouldn't potentially know any different, Alan, would you? Really from a day-to-day perspective.
No, it's only in the filters really where you can specify which tenants you want to be in your filter and what subscriptions you want to see. So yeah, they would just turn up in the subscription list with the parents' subscriptions or other customers' subscriptions in there, and just see them in effect a list then to then access and based on the roles they have in those other tenants.
Yeah, and then from a day-to-day user experience perspective, you don't have to switch into a different environment. There's no separate account. It's just there, isn't it? Ready to go at all times. So from a user experience perspective, you basically can't get any better than Lighthouse, can you?
No, and I think from a partner perspective, it might be that, say you delegate. I mean, we use it from the side of Microsoft Sentinel, and from managed service perspective of that. But if we talked about an application deployment, maybe, you may have access. The developer might have access, or the software company might have access to a resource group or a subscription, and they manage their deployment of the software that you've purchased. It might just be they have some automation in their tenant to do the patching of it, update the resources, rebuild, might have some CI/CD capability maybe. Then that allows them to do it from their tenant across multiple customers and update everyone at the same time, or do the staging of updates across customers, and then also help with diagnosing problems with them and things like that. They don't have to have access to your whole tenant, to Microsoft Entra ID or Azure ID or anything like that. You've literally told them you have access to this, and that's where your application's sitting. So do what you need to in that environment. So yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely, really powerful, and it's probably worth talking at this stage about the different service integrations as well, because this is I suppose is. I probably shouldn't box it like this, but it's probably more realistic in a customer and a service provider and customer scenario where you are having those specific service integrations, right? So you mentioned Sentinel, and effectively being able to peer into having cross-tenant workbooks, being able to pull data in from your customer environments, right? How would have that been done in the past, Alan? Would have been service principal, I assume, to have that level of sort of integration?
Yeah, I guess it would be, and using APIs to access that information rather than using the native kind of connectivity within Azure kind of thing. Service principals, or it would be service principals, either multi-tenant service principals or service principals in the customer environments with the secrets being passed over to the partner to use, to be able to use, and then having to manage that access or that key, etc.
Yeah, definitely. And we've got other scenarios where we are getting representation of Azure Arc enabled servers. So hybrid servers. I suppose it's probably worth just talking about Azure Arc, where you have could be an on-premise or hybrid virtual machine. Maybe it's in a different cloud outside of Azure, where you get a representation of that machine in Azure, and what this can be really powerful for is being able to manage those servers at scale from a service provider to customer scenario, because you are able to apply, like the same set of policies across customers' hybrid machines. You can use we won't talk about Defender for we'll talk about Defender for Cloud now. But Defender for Cloud, because it may be that you want to monitor the compliance across your customer environments as well, because if you are a user of Defender for Cloud, it is what's the best way of describing it? It's sliced in whatever visibility you've got in your subscription filter, basically. Yeah. So your Defender for Cloud view is determined by what you have filtered. So because we get those subscriptions just present and resources, I should say, presenting themselves just natively in our Azure portal, we're able to point Defender for Cloud at those resources and start to see their posture and manage it from that side of things. So that is obviously another powerful way of doing it.
Yeah, and there's other things like you might want to. I mean, if we talk about Microsoft Sentinel's scenario, you might have the Microsoft Sentinel, the customer's Microsoft Sentinel running. You may have playbooks in the parent or in the provider that is then triggered by the customer's Sentinel to then do triaging, etc., or any automation, create ticket generation, or going through the different levels of analysts that it goes through. So yeah, there's definitely some overlap where you can trigger on the data, because you can kind of not necessarily, the data is still stored in in the primary tenant and subscription, but it can be accessed when permissions are there, kind of thing. So there's definitely some scenarios that you can do with it.
Yeah, and probably just a less used one from my perspective, but you can deploy Azure policy across your customer environments at scale as well. I've personally never seen that being done. I assume it must be. Managing Azure policy on on behalf of your customers. Maybe you've got an initiative or a set of policies that you wish to apply just across your customer environments. You can also do that as well. So it is very powerful from an integration perspective, and it's probably worth just taking it back to, it is just a view of that subscription and resource group. With the correct permissions, there is a lot that you can just natively deploy like you normally would, right? So and it's probably worth calling out is those data actions there's just a flat ban on data actions as well. So you can get some of those more specific, I'll call them specific roles, right? To specific workloads, where you might have issues with rolling out resources, but then not being able to actually fire the data actions that you need to interact with them, right? But that's a data privacy block and protection there from that side.
Yeah, and I think it's some of the roles that you have where you have normal RBAC roles as well as the data action ones. The data action ones on those roles just won't work, but the rest of the roles will still work.
Yes.
And so it's not like this role's got some data actions, that means you can't use it at all.
Yeah.
It just means you might not have the functionality you need because it might be a data action that you want to use.
Yeah, a great thing to call out, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so we kind of talked about partners or service providers kind of using this, but can organizations use it internally?
Yeah, definitely. It's, if you are an organization that has multiple tenants, I've already talked about the example of having a development, staging, and production tenant. And calling that out, that's probably a setup that you should have internally. You might also have tenants in different regions that are separated. That might be due to regulatory compliance reasons. It might also be from mergers and acquisitions that you've made along the way. We see organizations that have acquired other businesses, and to start off with, they don't. Maybe sometimes they never do. Roll all of those directories and tenants into one singular place. They just end up managing multiple areas, basically. And what Lighthouse is really good for is you could have what we would call like your managing tenant, your primary one. Maybe that's your production enterprise tenant, maybe, and then your customers, in inverted commas, would be your other tenants in your organization. Now, when you go into the service providers section in Azure, when you click add offer, there's basically two options. There's add from marketplace, which we've already discussed, and then there's add from template. And what you can do is you can create your own JSON ARM template to base. Is it an ARM template? I believe it is an ARM template, isn't it? An ARM template to effectively describe your configuration and what you want to roll out. My call out is if you're an organization and you look at Lighthouse, some of the documentation can make it seem like it's only really for partners and customer. If you look at the documentation, it is really focused on, there is a call out for, rolling your own as an organization. But don't be put off by that. Just sort of pretend like you are a service provider and your customers or your other tenants internally. So you can define those, and then you would go through the process of opting each one of those in with the delegations. It's probably worth at this point actually talking about sort of just-in-time access to roles as well, because that's something that we've kind of skipped over really. So if I suppose if you're not aware of sort of just-in-time and sort of least privileged access, we have a system called privileged identity management inside of Entra ID. Is it Entra, Alan? Entra ID now?
Yep, not formally Azure AD yet. I think it's
Okay.
October when the portal start properly changing the name, so we've got to start.
But is it Entra Privileged Identity Management or Entra ID Privileged Identity Management now?
It's Entra ID Privileged Identity Management.
Okay,
but
fine, thank you.
I think a lot of the time I always announced it as Privileged Identity Management within just Azure AD,
Okay.
not necessarily because it was too long anyway. Azure AD Privileged Identity Management was still quite long anyway.
Yeah, exactly. But essentially, what that system allows you to do is it allows you to give people the ability to have just-in-time access to a specific role. And it's not just role. Well, let's just call it roles group. Let's call it roles. Keep it simple. So you could say, hey, I would like access to this role for a couple of hours, and you could provide some justification as to why you're doing that. You might set that on your, owner. That's a high, highly privileged role in Azure, and it might be better that your users don't use that role all the time day to day. You could have accidental misclicks and deletion from an attack perspective. Having a sort of another line of defense really in there. And what you can do with that is you can set that for authorization. So you can send that off for approval. So you can say, hey, Sam wants to become an owner, and it goes to Alan basically to approve that. We have got an episode on PIM, haven't we, I believe?
Yep, season 3, episode 4.
Oh, I knew you'd have it already.
I was just looking for it.
I knew you'd have it. But what Lighthouse does is it's effectively bringing that across as well with what they call eligible authorizations. I believe under the hood it uses PIM to do it. So there is a license requirement there, but I believe the license requirement is on just the parent.
I believe so, yeah, because it's the roles that'll be jumping into it, won't it?
Yeah, that's what I've read. I haven't really gone through that. I hadn't really thought about that until I actually properly read through the documentation on it. But you can, when you assign those eligible authorizations in the service provider section, you can see whether that has been configured and the scope for that those time period assignments on the customer side. Alan, is that something that the customers define, or do the service providers or managing tenants provide that that sort of that configuration?
I guess it depends on the sort of engagement. So if we're talking about partners, service providers, there may be a default they have that they use for each customer, so it's all in the template kind of thing. But there may be some scenarios where customer, and maybe depending on industry, things like that. Maybe the finance industry is tighter, maybe, than another type of industry. So I think it'll be based on the service provider mainly having a good base, but obviously documented and exposed to the customer as to what sort of time what the processes are for those roles.
And that configuration of that just-in-time access policy is done in the offer itself, right? To enforce, you can enforce multi-factor. you can define what the maximum activation duration is. So you could say that somebody could only activate those roles for, say, up to an hour or the time period that you set. And then you can also define the specific approvers that are needed to allow somebody to jump into those roles as well. So it's all sort of stamped in the offer there, ready to go.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's good. Yeah. If anyone hasn't or doesn't know too much about Privileged Identity Management PIM, then as we sort of shouted out earlier, season 3, episode 4 is a really good episode to dive into it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think the main thing that I see from Lighthouse from an organization perspective is really around Defender for Cloud. In my experience, that's sort of one of the day-to-day things that I see. And that is a really powerful way to get full visibility across multiple environments. Sometimes your development environments, especially, are completely isolated. You don't see anything that's going on there. And a lot of the time, the security posture of those environments can sometimes be poor. And the reason for that is because if you have these separate environments away, maybe they're not licensed to the same level. They're playgrounds which contain, in progress or, not finalized production code. So, some organizations I've seen have sort of been quite naive in terms of how dangerous those environments are, mainly because those environments don't store potentially sensitive data, right? You might have a policy where you say, right, no customer data, it's a development environment. Probably a good policy to have. But we have, it is possible to have those environments as a starting point for an attack with lateral movement, throughout the organization, right? So it is important to have visibility of those environments. Sorry, back to Lighthouse. Lighthouse is, with Defender for Cloud is going to give you that visibility. And even with the foundational CSPM quotes free version of Defender for Cloud, you still get a lot of value by having the visibility of those environments, right? You might not be able to do the more advanced things, but from a getting started perspective, that's a really powerful combination.
Yeah, you can still base against the Microsoft Cloud security benchmark, can't you? So, like you said, it's really powerful to get that visibility. And we've, as a partner, we've helped customers. I've definitely been involved in helping a customer with multiple tenants, like you said, Sam, around multiple regions that maybe they manage their own IT, in different parts of the world, but the HQ now wants to see what the posture is of all the environments now and see it centrally in a single view without having to jump to 10, 15 subscriptions, or tenants or something. So we've definitely seen that ask and deployed. And then, like you said as well, you didn't say, but with Defender for Cloud, then you've got your multi-tenants with all your subscriptions, and then you've got your GCP and AWS view in all in one place, haven't you?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Okay, so the parent organization is doing activity within your using Lighthouse to do activity. How is that activity tracked, and how is it visible to see what is being done by the parent tenant?
Yeah, so you're going to see the activity directly in your activity log, in Azure Monitor. So from a day-to-day activity log perspective, it's no different than any other activity in Azure, and I think that also lends itself to a confidence from the customer side that you're getting that control. And you're getting that visibility.
That's great then, isn't it? Because that's literally you've got it's not hidden what the parent company or the parent organization's parent tenant service provider is doing. You can track it all.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's, you can put all your own alerting in there. If you've got, if you've got Sentinel in there, you can do your own alerting against that activity if you want to, or if there are any concerns about activity, then at least you can backtrack it
Yeah, and if you've
from
got,
the actual activity.
I would say that Lighthouse is very open. At any time you can, remove that delegation. Right, you've got that control from the customer side. So
Hmm.
if you do see some activity that you don't like, then you've got the ability to take action on that. By yourselves. Right, so it really puts customers, especially, in control. Really.
Yeah, and from what I can remember as well, not Microsoft, a parent tenant can also remove themselves from the offering as well. I think you can add that role. So if for any reason you want to offboard from the customer or from the other tenant, they can themselves.
Yeah,
So
that's
that they don't
correct.
have
Yeah.
to worry about, the customer doing it, or, if they're, and maybe there's a dispute about contracts, things like that, they can in effect remove themselves from it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, no,
Without having to
definitely.
be with the customer. So that's great as well. And there's no problem with that because in effect that's just them removing their own access. So it's not a bad thing.
No, definitely not.
Okay, so this all sounds great, and we love this question. But how much does it cost?
It is completely free.
Can you just
Uh,
repeat that?
yeah, I know. Well, okay. The sorry, the PIM aspect of it. What's it actually called? It's the just in time access. There is a licensed element there, because it's under the hood. It's utilizing PIM, so you could say that that parent tenant, you require your P2 there to get that that functionality. But from a permanent role assignments perspective, um, and Lighthouse, it's completely free. I assume. Well, I suppose you have got the element of being a partner, if that makes sense. There's other associated effort and investment that you need to make, on that side. But from actually the technology itself, there is no cost at all.
Okay, so that's really good. So the service, the Lighthouse service itself, to allow you to gain insights from one tenant down to another or to multiples, is free. If you want to do some more advanced things like the previous identity manager side of things, you need the licensing for it, which makes sense. Which is going to be now Microsoft Entra ID P2 now. And of course, anything that you run or you build in the connection, like not the connection, but in the customer environment, the resource group, the subscription you have access to, is then consumption, is a cost for consumption, but the
Yeah,
actual
yeah.
connection is free.
Yeah, I suppose that's probably worth calling out, is that danger as well, because you are getting, potentially, it's probably worth thinking about the roles that you are getting assigned to yourselves, because we should always, work on, least privileged access, obviously. But like you say, there could be a knock-on effect of, it is possible for you to actually deploy resources in customer environments, which do have a knock-on cost associated.
Yeah, and that's where the roles being assigned needs to be considered, doesn't it? Are they allowed to spin them up? Do they need to be built by you, but they can manage them, etc.? It depends on those roles, what the third party or the parent tenant can do. In a organization that's using it's all their own sort of within their own, like, company, then that might not be too much of a problem because it's all the same sort of money per se kind of thing. But yeah, with a third party coming in, you might want to be more restrictive about what they can and can't do to ensure you don't accidentally create a large consumption bill potentially.
Yeah.
But there be things in the contracts and things that you sign up to that I guess you would say that some of the services, I think you can specify how much it costs as well, can't you? Because I think with the marketplace offerings, I think you might be able to do the Lighthouse plus the deployment of the service, maybe, because it's kind of all in the same sort of ARM template at that point, I think.
Yeah, I believe you can. Yeah.
So it might all be predefined that the customer deploys the initial resources, but then the roles are then managing those resources rather than actually doing the deployment or deletion kind of thing.
Exactly.
So yeah. Okay, so is there anything else, Sam, that you can think of? I feel like I'm gonna quickly probably do a quick summary about what it is, kind of what we talked about.
No, not from my perspective. Is there sort of any areas, Alan, that you think that I haven't covered?
No, I think you've covered it well. I think from a sort of summary perspective, Lighthouse is a mechanism to peer into other tenants from a single tenant into multiple tenants. It could be just into one, it could be into 10, it could be into 100. Gives the ability to give you roles in that resource group or subscription to be able to do your day-to-day job that you need to do. It might be deploying resource, might be managing virtual machines, etc. It gives the ability to elevate into roles in that subscription in the customer one, and it allows you to gain insight maybe from a security perspective from Microsoft Defender for Cloud into those other resources to see what your security posture is within those. And as we said, the customer is in control. They deploy it. They specify if it's a resource group, delegation, or a subscription. They can change the resource groups or update the resource groups and remove the service completely as well. So it's full control to the customer tenant or the secondary tenant. So yeah.
Is it worth sort of calling out as well? I believe it's right that every single delegation is separate for each scope, if that makes sense. So you could deploy the offer multiple times to separate resource groups and subscriptions. I believe you do it on a one-by-one basis, don't you?
Yes.
Or is it once you've got?
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't it once you've got one, you can expand it or something like that?
Yeah.
Can't you? Once it's deployed.
Yeah, exactly. So you do the initial deployment of the offer into a subscription or resource group, and then that offer's there, and then the customer tenant can then delegate that offer to other subscriptions resource groups.
That's correct.
Afterwards, and remove at the same time, but they can still keep the offer in the tenant, and then they can just delegate to a new subscription resource group if they want to, kind of thing. So I think on the initial deployment, you have to deploy it somewhere, and then there should be at least one resource group or subscription assigned. But after that, you can then assign it to multiple. So if you were, I suppose the example might be that if you had if from the organization perspective scenario, you may have parent tenant talking to customer or the secondary tenant, but that tenant might have like 10, 15, 20 subscriptions, and you want to be able to see the Defender for Cloud for all of those as our sort of example. You'd probably deploy the ARM template once to one subscription, and then add all the other subscriptions later as a sort of, in effect, like a select list, and then assign it, and then those permissions will then get added to those subscriptions.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that flexibility is really what, drives the value of Lighthouse, isn't it? Right? Having the ability to configure, change, unenroll, re-enroll, and move things around relatively quickly, right? Especially with the marketplace offerings. It's click, click, go, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I couldn't think of an episode, that is linked really to Lighthouse. So I'm gonna suggest that you go and listen to the PIM episode. Alan, sorry, what was it? Season 3, episode 4?
Yeah, I think that's what I said. Season 3, episode 4. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I got it. Yeah. So if you want to learn more about PIM, definitely go and check out that episode. Alan, what's the next episode?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about Microsoft Defender for Identity, one of the other defenders out there. It's been I'm surprised we haven't done an episode on it. I just quick, well, not just now, but I was checking through the other day, whether we covered it or not, and it appears we haven't. We may have talked about it briefly. So yeah, I'm going to talk about that, about helping detect possible infiltration of your Active Directory on-premise environment, where that potentially can get compromised, and in effect monitoring that, because we have identity protection for Enter ID and things like that for accessing that, as well as conditional access and and all the other sort of security tools that are around that. But this is looking at you got a hybrid identity, protecting your on-premise sort of environment around that. So yeah, that should be a good episode.
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay, so did you enjoy this episode? If so, please do consider leaving us a review on Apple or Spotify. This really helps us to reach more people like you. If you have any specific feedback or suggestions, we have a link in our show notes to get in contact with us.
Yeah, and if you've made it this far, thanks ever so much for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Yeah, thanks all.